Final segment of today's podcast, guys. We're not going to do the Michigan panic meter today because literally nothing has happened that would raise or lower our panic. By the way, you can't lower our panic because we have no panic about Michigan as of right now, as nobody should. Michigan shouldn't be panicking about Ohio State in February. That's not how this works. But interesting story. We've talked a lot about Justin Fields at the Combine, his Mount Rushmore. But given that Marvin Harrison Jr. seems locked to be a top 3 pick, it is noteworthy that Marvin Harrison Jr. has, one, not done any of the pre-scouting combine training that gets guys to be ready for Columbus and ready to dominate all these tests. 2, he has now also said he will not be working out or even showing up at the combine at all. So basically putting it all on his pro day and whatever tape there is out there, at which it is exquisite tape. And the third thing is, he's not hired an NFL agent either. So let's stick to the combine stuff, the pre-combine lack of training, and now the not going to the combine at all. Is this a big deal, a little deal, or a no deal for Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I think it's no deal. It's funny. I'm out here in Indy, as you know, Nick, and I was kind of debating. I was trying to figure out if I was going to be able to stay through Friday because that's the day the wide receivers work out, and I was thinking it might be cool to be here for Marvin Harrison's stuff. But then that didn't end up happening just because with the kid at home, I had to figure out kind of how to balance not making my wife have to take off too much work. So it didn't work out. So I'm leaving Thursday. But I thought what was interesting was then it didn't even matter because he came out and flat out said yeah, I won't be there. Oh, okay. So it didn't really end up mattering for me anyway. But I just think the combine, I've said this before. I think we get further and further away from the combine, meaning as much in terms of the off-season cycle of calendar events in the NFL. And I'm not saying it'll ever go away because we know, Nick, that the combine mostly is about sort of what we talked about the first segment. It's about the scuttlebutt of GMs talking to scouts and agents and who's going to do what. And this is where things really start to pick up in terms of rumors and what are the Bears going to do at 1 and what are the Browns going to trade back up in the first round? What are they trying to figure out what they want to do? So that's why I think the combine matters in terms of the NFL conversation. But I think the idea that you have to be here, you have to work out, this is the only time that you can really showcase yourself, I think is becoming an archaic mindset and an archaic thought process. I think you'll see more and more players do what Marvin Harrison is doing, which is, hey, I'm not going to be there. Or we do see every year guys just decide not to work out because they'd rather work out at the pro day. And in theory, a pro day sort of serves the player better anyway because it's their environment. They're in a controlled environment. They get to kind of call the shots. What does Marvin Somebody will try to spin this, I'm sure, because it sports talk radio, whatever. Somebody will take this and say, well, what does it mean that a guy won't show up to the NFL Combine? Is he really committed to the sport? That'll be the conversation. I'm sure somebody will bring that up because some dummy out there is going to try to have a take and make it a thing. But hopefully it's not you, Nick. But now you're thinking about it. I just don't think this matters to somebody like Marvin as much as it matters to, a fringe second-round pick who's you know what, I got to try to get my stock up and see if I can become a first-round pick or, keep myself from being later in the second round. To them, it matters. To a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., who is a consensus top 5 pick, most likely in this. I'm saying that because we don't know if teams always trade up to take quarterbacks above everything else. So I just don't know how that's all going to fall at this point. But he's going to go top 5. And with that in mind, what does he have to prove to these people? You know what you're getting with him. He has it all on the tape. I understand they probably want to interview him. I'm imagining he'll make himself available for those types of things down the line. You can always host guys on visits and all this different stuff, so fine. But I just don't think this matters for him. So I think it's the littlest deal that it could possibly be. It stinks from a standpoint of maybe scouts or people that wanted to see him that maybe didn't get a chance to see him in person would have been able to see him here. But there's still a belief within the scouting community that the tape matters most of all. And he put on tape everything he could possibly put on tape. I don't think there's anything left for him to prove, so it doesn't matter.
So when it comes to I think it's a little deal too. I am disappointed because I wanted to see Marvin at the combine because I think he'd do great at it. But I think I think I'd rather him say, you know what, I'm not going to do this testing than half-ass I'm not going to do this pre-combine training. I'm just going to focus on getting ready for the NFL. I'm going to focus on being the best version of myself. I'd rather him make that decision and, maybe rattle some people than half-ass it and hurt his draft stock in some of those things. And listen, there are other guys. I mean, Robert Saleh isn't going to the combine. So there are NFL head coaches who don't go because they don't see value in it. I think they're dumb. I actually think it matters more for the teams because of understanding whatever's going on in the ether, who's available, who's not available. I also think it matters because once you meet these kids, I don't think you really get a sense for who somebody is until you have an honest, authentic conversation with them. And I think it's easier in a situation where the league or the team or the combine controls it than in a pro day where that guy's going to be more relaxed. So I think a head coach not doing it is ridiculous. For Marvin, listen, I mean, the only way it doesn't work is if Marvin falls in the draft. And I just can't, Lance Zierlein, NFL.com, NFL Network, Houston Radio Lore. His dad was a legendary. Larry Zierlein was a legendary offensive line coach in the NFL for Pittsburgh way back in the day. Lance knows football, but Lance kind of threw out there the people aren't going to like this, and I have Malik Neighbors as wide receiver 1, and I'm just listen, I actually think Malik Neighbors is a hell of a football player. But if you take Malik Neighbors before you take Marvin Harrison Jr., you are a special kind of dumb. And if you do it because Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't show up to the combine, you might be beyond dumb. You might be something much, much worse.
Yeah, it's funny because you hear these NFL scouts talk themselves into guys who have off the field issues and stuff because they're well, he's just super talented. And so it's funny when something not showing up at the combine or something is held against a guy. Does he take the game seriously? But then there's players who have some off the field issue and they're well, we see a lot of potential in this guy. So it's just funny. There's so much hypocrisy, I think, in the way that these things are discussed. You bring up Neighbors, by the way. I had to laugh at another thing I saw this week because PFF, and my stance on PFF is always that I think they do some valuable work that nobody else or not a lot of other people are doing, right? So I think they provide some context to NFL players, college players in terms of how their season went, what they did well, all these different things. I'm willing to accept that and say, yes. So I use PFF for certain things. But I also take PFF with a grain of salt sometimes because I don't know that it's similar to the concept of drafting players. It's not an exact science. Mm-hmm. And I saw something they put out the other day that was the most valuable wide receivers in college football last season at the FBS level. And it was Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors. And I'm fine. Those two guys, I agree with you. I think Neighbors is going to be a really good, impactful player in the NFL. Odunze is consensusly wide receiver number 2 behind Marvin Harrison Jr. But if you're going to tell me that those two guys are more valuable than what Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Marvin Harrison proved he was more valuable than even people thought he was going to be going into this year because that offense quite literally ran through him for most of the season. We've had how many conversations, Nick, about Kyle McCord and how the only thing he could do was throw it to Marvin Harrison Jr. and hope that he made a play. And there were so many games where it was just Kyle McCord throwing it to Marvin Harrison Jr. and he made a play. But you're telling me that those two guys were more valuable? Odunze was a really good wide receiver in an offense that had a lot of other talent on it. There's
Michael Penix Jr. You mean the guy who should have been the Heisman winner? Yeah.
And Polk's going to get drafted. They have a bunch of wide receivers that are all going to go and get drafted potentially in a couple weeks here. You can't tell me that that's true. So this is where this stuff is just kind of silly to me. Half the time, and I'm not saying PFF did it this way because theirs is more a grading system, but people are just looking for a take. People are just looking for something to say and be outraged by, and I'm not going to even sweat it. If these scouts really want to be dumb and not draft Marvin Harrison Jr. because, God forbid, he didn't show up to the combine, he must not take the game seriously, then you'll be looking for a job in about a year from now. And you'll know why. You'll know why that is, because you passed on a generational player that we all could see clear as day. Like, I don't have to be a scout to know what that Marvin Harrison Jr. is, as sure of a thing as there is a sure thing.
Well, and here's the thing, like, you're watching this tape and you're watching him make play after play with a quarterback who is wildly inaccurate. You know what I mean? Like, and listen, I'm not trying to relitigate the Kyle McCord thing. Time is going to age really well for me. This take is going to age really well, that Kyle is a middle of the road passer at this point. And maybe he develops. I hope he does. And there's egg on my face. I never root for a kid to do bad because I have a take that thinks that guy's not very good. But like, when it comes to Kyle McCord, look at the passes. You might get one really nice pass out of every 10 passes from Kyle. Most of them were wobbly, inaccurate, forced, whatever. Hurried throws because he didn't deal well with pressure. You get Marvin in a system with a good quarterback, right? And like, it's so ridiculous. You could see Marvin fall maybe as far as 4 or 5, depending on how many quarterbacks come off the board right off the rip. Kyler Murray has been a troublesome quarterback when he hasn't been healthy, and he might be a little bit of a jackass. Can you imagine giving that kid friggin' Marvin Harrison Jr.? Can you imagine if the NFL draft, you start to fall a little bit, right? And you start to see New England's different because I think I don't think they're going to bring back Mac Jones, and even then, I think the guy's a bit of a slap ass. But like, let's say he does start to fall because of this. If he gets to 5 with the Chargers with Justin Herbert, are you kidding me? Like, look at other teams. Like, let's get really crazy here. Let's say he falls to 15 with Indianapolis, and he's with Anthony Richardson. Good luck beating him. You're going to give him to Matt Stafford? Like, the NFL, listen, the NFL does some dumb things. Kyle Hamilton was a top 5 pick that fell to 14 with Baltimore. Tyler Linderbaum, I'm just going to go through Ravens drafts that I like. Tyler Linderbaum was a top 15 pick that fell to, I think, like 20 or 25 because, well, he's an Iowa player. You don't want to draft a center or a guard with a top. Okay. All that dude, both guys have done and been some of the best players at their position.
Yeah.
So I dare the NFL. I dare these scouts, because what it is, you mentioned something I want to get back to. I'm so glad that I'm circling back to my take finally. This is about control. NFL teams want to see you do things the way they've set it up.
It's almost like dance monkey, like dance for us. Like that's what it is.
It is 100%. It's 100% about, well, we need to see you play the game. And that is such an old school mentality that it just doesn't exist anymore.
Put on the tape and you'll see Marvin Harrison play.
Exactly. That is all that matters.
I have said this on the record before. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., like the day he's drafted, will already be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. Like that's how good he is. And listen, you could debate me on that. There's some really, really good wide receivers. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams. Like, we can go through the list. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL the day he gets drafted. If you want to pass on that, good luck to you.
All right, guys. So we want to hear from you in the comment section. We want to hear from you, 92.3 The Fan, YouTube channel, at Nick Wilson Says, at Spencito _ on social media. How big deal, little deal, no deal on the Marvin Harrison Jr. thing, not going to the combine. We want to hear your thoughts on Justin Fields and his Mount Rushmore.
I hate mine. I'm looking back. I'm like, you got in my head. I changed it all up. I was panicking on the fly. I hate it. I need to rethink and come back.
It's okay. You need to, you know what? That was your preliminary. That's your preliminary. You can reach a final Mount Rushmore for Ohio State.
We were starting recording. I was like, I'm good. I'm good. And then
I jammed you up. It's not your fault, buddy. I poured Daryl yesterday. It was like Lima got jammed up hard yesterday. This week, for some reason, maybe it's because I'm going on vacation this weekend, I jammed up everybody. So it's not just you. I apologize. Your list was fine. It was cute. It was just good enough.
That's okay. You know what that's like, Nick? That's like you're about to have coitus with a girl, and you drop your pants, and she says, "Oh, that's cute," How demeaning is that, Nick? Is that what is that really what you want to hear? That your list was cute? That's how you end the show? Come on. I'm going to spend the rest of the day now panicking, overthinking things, thinking I'm not good enough. I'm not man enough, Nick. Thanks a lot.
If a woman ever said that when I was about to do the coitus, I'm just going to tell you right now, I'd become a monk and I'd never do coitus again.
Exactly.
But that's different than your Mount Rushmore. Thank you very much.
And you're ending the show by saying your list was cute. Like, come on, I'm going to be in my head the whole rest of the goddamn day now.
No, you know what? I'll be honest with you. Better Mount Rushmore's a little too much for me. I like a simple, nice, cute Mount Rushmore. It's not about the size or quality of your Mount Rushmore. It's about how well you use it. And you used it just okay there. That was just fine. I've had better Mount Rushmores for Ohio State football. And trust me, too much work. All the giggles and excitement that I had. Oh, no, not that. Just give me a good, smooth Mount Rushmore, and I'm right there. A cute Mount Rushmore. We've done some damage here today. All right, guys. Comment on the show page or comment on the 92.3 Fan YouTube channel. Please follow us everywhere you get your podcast there. Apple, Spotify, 923thefan.com, the free Odyssey app. Please follow the show. We appreciate it. And we'll look for your comments in the section there, guys. We'll be back. Spencer will be back solo this weekend because I am going, or rather later this week, because I am going on a little weekend vacay there. But I'll be back next week. Spencer will be talking the combine, all that nonsense. Next week, we've got, I don't know, spring practice in the offing. So we'll see if we have a special guest or two with us next week. But really appreciate you guys stopping by. Spencer, go Bucks.